All right, it's our last session. I'm so sad. Really going to miss it. I don't know about you, but I love this stuff, and I think it is so important. Healthcare all over the world costs too much, not accessible to people because it costs too much, got very erratic kind of quality. You don't know if you're going to a good one and a bad one. Everything we've talked about will make healthcare cheaper, more accessible, and with more consistent quality. And you can help make it happen with the frameworks that we've used in this course. So now we're coming to our last case study of an innovator. This innovator, we've hit the big time. This is one of the biggest firms in the world. It's Philips. It's a Dutch firm, and it's the General Electric of Europe. It makes light bulbs, it makes diagnostic products, it makes lifestyle products. But here we're looking at a specific part of Philips where it is in healthcare. And it's got a decision, and this is cool stuff. This is about telemedicine. And everybody's yammering about telemedicine instead of going to a doctor's office. You know, they don't call you patient for nothing. You better be patient if you go to a doctor's office. But here you are, you have a job, you have children, you have elder loved ones, you're part of a two-career couple, blah, blah. You're so busy, and patient, that's not for you. So telemedicine is a solution to that, where whatever's going on with you is televised, and it makes it more convenient for you and likely lower costs. So Philips is going telemedicine in what it calls a hospital-to-home program. And essentially what it means to do is to take patients out of the hospital earlier and to monitor them in the home. They got an early start in this by buying a company called VisiQ. VisiQ is a way of monitoring in the intensive care unit in the hospital people who are very, very sick. That's why they're intensive care. And VisiQ has all kinds of cameras and algorithms and diagnostic techniques for monitoring these people. And what they enable is that the doctors and nurses, rather than running around visually from bed to bed, very time-consuming and costly kind of activity, can instead rely on the monitors, on the data that's fed into computers about the health status of these people, and very smart algorithms that tell them, clang, you better get to this right away, or this person is okay. So Philips bought this company, VisiQ, bought it for about $500 million. Not a big bet for a company the size of Philips, not a minor bet either. And it's run VisiQ. And the founder of VisiQ, a physician named Brian Rosenfeld, has stayed with the company. And he is an intensivist by training. That means he's one of the doctors who used to look at these very, very sick people in the intensive care unit. But he's also kind of a techie. That's why he developed VisiQ. And now he thinks, you know, we can do it the other way around. We can enable telemedicine by looking at people who've been discharged from the hospital earlier than they might normally be and looking at them in their home settings. So is this a good idea or not a good idea? And if it's a good idea, Rosenfeld, who's the lead pusher of this idea within Philips, and his peers, they've got a number of decisions. So one decision is, how do they price this? Do they price it by saying to the hospital, you've got to pay us X for installation of this hospital to home telemedicine system? Or do they price it by saying to the hospital, look, you're going to save a lot of money if you do this, and I'm going to go at risk. You're not going to pay me, but I'm going to share the savings that we jointly create with you. That's a decision, big decision. Second decision is, where do they start? So what kind of hospital should they go to so that they demonstrate the value of this hospital-to-home program? Should they go to a big hospital? Should they go to an academic medical center? These are usually big hospitals that have a lot of professors of medicine involved with them. They treat very, very sick people. Should they go to a community hospital instead, which doesn't deal with such sick people, but is a smaller kind of environment? So first question is, should they do this at all? And second question is, if the answer is yes, how do they actually do it? How do they price it? What kind of hospital should they go to first? And in addition, how should they staff it? So when they did VisiQ, they provided their own staff to help the hospital adapt the VisiQ model. But some hospitals threw that staff out. They wanted to do it themselves. So if you decide this is a good idea, there are a lot of execution questions that we need to answer. So let's turn to the 6 factors analysis of whether this is a good idea. Is hospital to home, how well aligned is it with the 6 factors? Once you have a group discussion of this, and let's come back and talk about it. So let's look at the structure factor. Will the structure like the idea of telemedicine? It's not clear to me that they will. So if you get the patients out of the hospital earlier, there will be some clinicians who think, not without merit, that viewing this patient at home is not the same, thank you very much, as actually having that patient right there in the hospital, and if something goes wrong, I can deal with it right away. So structure, don't know if they like it or not. There are clinicians who are huge believers in telemedicine. They're friends. But the ones who think I've got to look at them, they're going to be foes. How about the financing picture? Not so clear. There are some studies that show that telemedicine is cost-effective, and some studies that show that it's not cost-effective. So is it for the buyer? Is it worthwhile? Don't know. What I do know is that in the United States, increasingly, hospitals and doctors are no longer paid fee-for-service. In other words, they're not paid a price for everything they do. Instead, they're being paid a fixed price for taking care of a patient. Let's say a fixed price for everything they do for a patient with congestive heart failure who is in the hospital and is under their care. If telemedicine is cost effective, it is to the advantage of that hospital to get the patient out of the hospital and into the home. If it is not cost effective under this new regimen of bundled or global pricing, they're not going to be interested. And I don't know about you, the way I read the studies in the case is half a dozen of this and half a dozen of that. But Philips, should Philips be interested from a financing perspective? You bet. If you look at the exhibit we're showing you about the stock market performance of Philips versus its competitors, competitors are going like this, Philips going like that, or sometimes going like this. It's not doing that well. You see that the only part of Philips that's making any money is the healthcare division. And within healthcare, is VisiQ a big contributor or not? We don't know that from the public financial statements, but from the data we know about VisiQ before Philips acquired them, VisiQ was very, very profitable. So what's the bottom line on financing? Whether or not the buyer will buy, I'm not sure. But should Philips do this? Doesn't look like the other parts of Philips are doing that well. Healthcare would seem to be a very promising area for them to invest in. So on a related issue, how's the accountability of the hospital to home? It's like the financing. It looks to be at least as good care in terms of quality, if not better. But whether it's a better value for the money, and these things are expensive, millions of dollars to install telemedicine, I don't know. So how is public policy about this? Public policy is, I don't know either. So yeah, it sounds good. And you'll see, oh, telemedicine, future of medicine, but don't believe it, because the accountability data that would tell you one way or the other are still very, very primitive. So structure, question mark, financing, question mark, accountability, question mark, public policy, question mark. Anything good in here about hospital to home? Well, one good thing is Philips probably is very interested in this because it's the most promising part of their portfolio. And consumers likely are in favor of it. We're so busy. We're called patients. Patients must be patient. Telemedicine makes things much more convenient. And I don't know about you, but I would rather be in my home than in a hospital sitting next to a guy who's been shot by an Uzi. So a lot of consumers, I think, favor the idea. So we got one positive. And technology, I think this is very, very positive for Philips. And to analyze why it's so positive, why I think it's so positive, let's go back to our technology evaluation framework. So this is number 10 on our business model list, and we use it only when we evaluate new technologies. So why don't you go through this framework and tell me whether you like the technology as much as I like the technology. So I like it. I think it's very positive. I think the consumers are positive and the technology is positive, and Philips whether or not the other of these 6 factors are positive, and they're not negative, they're not positive, they're question mark. Philips really needs to take a bet on this. So what about the technology? Well, what is the technology? It's like computers 101. So there are a lot of cameras and other camera-based instruments and electrical instruments that take a look at your eyes, and they take a look at your skin, and they measure your heart, and they measure how much oxygen you have in your system. Compared to the drug that we looked at with Alexion, understanding the black box, even I understand that black box. Does it work? Ha. Does your little iPhone work? Yeah. Does the iPhone have a camera? Yeah. Is the camera pretty good? Yeah. Yeah, I think we've got a lot of research. We understand how this stuff works, and a lot of research that shows it works very well. Are there downside risks to this technology? Of course. Good as all these instruments are, they're not that good. And there is the danger that some important clinical risk, clinical I mean something happens to the patient at home, will be missed, and that patient's going to be at the home, and you're going to have a longer time in being able to do something about it. The plus side, however, is the patient is at home, a far less risky environment than being in the hospital. So while there are downside risks, there are also great upside potential. Let's look at the financial considerations with this technology. Is it acceptable to medical personnel? We don't know. Some of the clinicians will resist having their patients discharged early. Some of the physicians, I have students in my class who are MDs, and they have masters or doctorates in bioinformatics. These guys are gung-ho, let's do telemedicine. So it's a split in the medical community. Is it financially beneficial to the people who use it? We don't know. Is it going to create turf warfare among different kinds of doctors? I don't think so. I think if it is adopted, that doctors will have an easier time of monitoring their patients, and nurses who do most of the monitoring will also have an easier time of it. So I think it's not that this technology pits one kind of doctor against another kind of doctor or doctors against nurses. I think if they like it, they'll really like it. This technology is in a new site. It provides very high-level monitoring in the home. But, Philips has done this. So Philips also acquired a firm in which people wore monitors around their necks. And if something happened to them, if they fell, for example, they have a system where that monitor alarms, and there's a whole customer call center which is responsive to those alarms. So Philips is in a pretty good position in being in these new sites. Does this technology create a pipeline of other technologies? You bet. We're very nascent in measuring how people are doing in their homes. Among the things, just for example, there are yarns that measure things that are going on around the skin. And you could have a sweater or a blouse or some piece of clothing which constantly monitors your bodily functions. This is a technology that is already being used. It's called medical yarns. I could see Philips adopting it. I could see lots of other things emerging from this platform. I give it a plus. Market size and ease of penetrating it. If this works, if we show telemedicine's cost effective, the market's got to be billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars, maybe hundreds of billions of dollars. Can you penetrate it? Well, we'll get back to that when we discuss the business model issues. But net on this financial considerations, looks great. The only fly in the ointment, as far as I can see, is whether they can prove that it is really cost effective. Regulatory issues. Are the regulators going to be interested in making this possible? You know, healthcare in the United States is 18% of the economy. Its rate of growth far exceeds the rate of growth of the economy. If they can show that these technologies are cost effective, the regulators will be all over this. They will rush to get this approved. And our healthcare problems, Europe's no better. Rate of growth of healthcare costs much greater than the rate of growth of the economy. Yeah, the regulators will like this, especially because it's not invasive technology. You don't have to implant people with things to make this work. Potential competition from other technologies could be. There are pills that have little cameras embedded in them, and the pills monitor what's going on inside your body. They're nascent. One of the companies that makes these pills was just purchased for about $1 billion, but it's still a very nascent technology. If it works, Philips could adopt it because they're going to be in the home. Can they obtain patents? How do you spell duh? Yeah, of course, they're going to obtain patents. Is this stuff hard to manufacture? No. In fact, Philips buys most of the components, the computers, the diagnostics, the cameras, buys them from focused factory manufacturers who are great in doing it. So where are we with all of the 6 factors, hospital to home? Structure, question mark. Financing, question mark. Accountability, question mark. Public policy, question mark. Big positive. Consumers, big positive. At least to me, technology. I say give it a shot. But how do you give it a shot? How do you price it? Do you staff it yourself? What kind of hospital do you go to? And before you do all that, is this a really viable business model? We've seen the 6 factors, they're not so clear. Some of our other case studies, 6 factors were very clear. Do it or don't do it. Here, not so clear. So the business model becomes much more important. The analysis of the business model. Is this if we do this, is this a viable business? So let's look at number 1, caveats. So I've been warning you about how you should not trust true believers. Brian Rosenfeld is a true believer. He is the creator of VisiQ. He believes in VisiQ. Should you believe him? Not because he's a liar. He's not lying, but he believes it. I believe Brian Rosenfeld, and the reason I believe him is he's done this before. He's walked the talk. He's promised to do something with telemedicine, and he was a great success with it. So I'm not so worried about his promises. Question number 2, what am I? What kind of venture is this? And the reason we want to answer this question is there are business model issues that follow that are unique to different kinds of ventures. So what do you think this is? Is this a consumer-facing venture? Is this an integrator venture? Or is this a technology venture? Lots of people think that this is a technology venture. I am not among them. This technology is nothing like the technology that Alexion developed, which promised to greatly ameliorate the suffering of people with a dreadful disease. This is relatively low-tech technology. The real play here is that this is an integrator venture that promises to make healthcare quality more consistent, and by making it more consistent, to lower the costs of healthcare and to do it in a number of sites so that the cost of the telemedicine itself drops because they achieve economies of scale. The reason it's important to identify what this is we want to make sure we've got the right kind of management for managing an integrator venture as opposed to a technology venture. We'll get back to this in a second. So 6 forces alignment. We did this. 4 no's, 2 yeses. I say go for it, or at least analyze the business model, but it's not clear on the 6 factors. So if the business model is no good, we don't want to do this. So one aspect of the business model is what kind of competitive strategy do they have? Are they a first mover? Are they a fast follower with managerial excellence that will learn from somebody else's mistakes? Or are they the kind of strategy where they have legal barriers, patents, or other legal barriers to competition? Hospital to home is a first mover strategy. It's fantastic first mover strategy. Because once you have those computers and those diagnostic and monitoring instruments installed in the home and in the hospital, who the heck is going to come and tear that all out and replace it with something else? So, even though the 6 factors were not so clear, I'm beginning to warm up to this thing. I like the technology. I like the consumers. Wasn't so sure. But this competitive strategy, this is very, very powerful. Is it financially viable? That's our next question. From the case, you can see that there are substantial savings to be generated by bringing the patients to the home rather than keeping them in the hospital. So if Philips shares in those savings, this could be a very financially viable kind of business. And the reason it would be financially viable is that it is a scalable kind of business. So Philips has the cost of developing the algorithms and developing the connectivity between the computers and the monitoring instruments in the home. But that's a more or less one-time cost, this developmental cost. And after that, it has very little in the way of variable costs. Let's try to figure out how big this market is. So let's say that Philips goes at risk. At risk means it doesn't get paid anything unless it saves money for sick babies, low-weight babies. According to the exhibit, the savings are roughly around $26,000 by taking that baby out of the hospital and putting that baby in the home. Suppose Philip says, I'm going to share 50% of the savings with you, roughly $13,000 per baby. What are its revenues going to be? Okay, we're near the end of this course. I'd like you to give me an answer to this question. So let me repeat it. We're focusing on low-weight babies. We're going to get $13,000, 50% of the savings, from taking this low-weight baby out of the hospital into the home. What will the revenues be? So the March of Dimes, which is an organization that's focused on low-weight babies, it says there are 500,000, an astonishing number, of babies who are low weight. Let's say Philips gets 5% of that market. Small percentage, 25,000 babies. And it gets $13,000 for each of those babies. How much would it earn in revenues? $325 million. So even by focusing at just one segment of the hospital-to-home business and taking a very small market share, only 5%, and pricing at risk, you got a heck of a business. And the marginal costs, the incremental costs of doing this business are very small. This is a big fixed cost business. IT in general, information technology, lots of fixed costs in developing the system, and it's scalable. If you get a lot of customers, you're going to do very, very well. So VisiQ's high profit margins indicate that getting good profits in this business is very viable. So Philips' first mover advantage and this big market and the savings that a hospital to home can generate, well, this is a good business, very financially viable, and a business with great valuation. In fact, if it's successful, this business could generate billions, tens of billions in yearly revenues for Philips. So when we look at the business model, this is beginning to look much more attractive than when we looked at the 6 factors. But is it sustainable? Okay, they'll make a lot of money and they'll do a lot of good, but can they keep up the advantage? Is the revenue sustainable? Well, they're the first movers in this market, and as we discussed, it's going to be very hard to dislodge them once they have the equipment in the hospital, in the home. They're sustainable. Furthermore, if you look at their competitors, General Electric, Intel, it just goes on and on. I'm not kind of bowled over by those competitors. It's not that they're not great companies, but they're not great companies in the hospital-to-home business. Philips, through its acquisition of VisiQ, probably is among the best providers of those services, other than a company called Robert Bosch. So are the revenues sustainable? Probably. Are the costs sustainable? Well, most of the costs are fixed costs, so yeah, they're sustainable. Is the management sustainable? Well, Philips bought his company. I don't know if you know this, but when a big company buys an entrepreneurial company, those entrepreneurs leave. And the reason they leave is the big company culture, small company culture, they're miles apart. But Rosenfeld, he's hung in there. He likes Philips, and they like him. And he's got a whole team of people around him. Now, if I were part of this team and I had the opportunity to move people out of the hospital, reduce costs, improve the quality of care, be the first mover in this market, make tens of billions of dollars for my company, I'd be real loyal too. So is there a financial risk here? Well, the financial risk is in the big fixed cost of developing the hospital-to-home program. If it works, it's going to be a bonanza, and if it doesn't work, Philips will be stuck with having spent a lot of money to develop these programs that integrate the algorithms with the cameras and other monitoring equipment in the home. Is this something where the management is appropriate to the nature of the business? Well, I decided it's an integrator business. You may have decided differently. Is Rosenfeld appropriate for running an integrator business? He is out of CEO Central Casting. Why is that? He's been there, he's done that. He has run a telemedicine venture. He is an intensivist and he's kind of an IT techie. He has functioned well within a big company. He took a little company and he made it a big company. Come on, what more do you want? Furthermore, Rosenfeld here's this doctor. He was the head of sales for VisiQ. Very unusual for a doctor to do that. And he was fabulous at doing it. So this man, he's, as I say, out of CEO Central for leading this particular kind of venture. Only worrisome thing about him is he's not old and he looks terrific. But he's not 30 years old, so the only managerial issue in his case is he grooming his successor? And if you read this case, you see team. People are continually working with VisiQ. I don't know, but I feel that there's such prudent and smart people about their business that they understand that they've got to groom the next generation, because if this business takes off, this is going to be gigantic. It will transform Philips, will transform the healthcare system, and they need a lot of good, seasoned people to do this. So the last part of the business model question is this a do good, do well venture? Certainly, if it goes, it's going to be real do well. They will do very well with it. Do good? We do not know. We still have these questions about whether or not telemedicine is cost effective. So where are we with this? Clearly, they need to do beta testing and to demonstrate and test whether telemedicine is indeed cost effective. And if it is, go to it. So this is what we started with. How did they do that testing? Where did they go? If you were in Rosenfeld's shoes, where would you test out this hospital-to-home program? Would you go to a big academic medical center, which has a lot of sick people? I'd be worried about it. That's a very hard environment to manage clinical experiments in, especially when this clinical experiment is not about some breathtaking new drug or surgical procedure. It's about using computers to monitor people. How excited is the academic medical center going to be about this? Some might be, but it wouldn't be my number one pick. Would I go to a smaller hospital? Well, they're not so chaotic, but they don't have that many sick people. So where would I go? I would go to where VisiQ has been installed. So these are places, many of them are academic or large medical centers, but they've already tested some kind of telemedicine concept, and they've accepted it, and they flourished with it. So to do my beta site, my pick for a beta site would be VisiQ customers that have a number of the kinds of sick patients who can benefit from being transferred from the hospital to the home. Would I staff it myself, or would I ask the hospital to staff it? I would staff it myself. By staffing it myself, I would maintain more control over this beta testing, and I'd also learn a lot about how to get it done. How would I price it? No question for me. I would go at risk. I wouldn't ask for any money, but I would ask for a large percentage of the savings. If my beta site shows that this is very cost-effective, I would use different strategies. Rather than staffing it myself, which adds to my fixed costs and which the hospitals may not like anyway, I would train them, as they do with VisiQ, to run this telemedicine project, and I would help them to make sure that it functions well. And with time, probably I could not keep going at risk, because the hospitals would resent giving me so much of the savings that have been created, and I would have to go to a flat fee model. Flat fees in healthcare technology, they're nothing to sneer at. Companies that sell computer systems at flat fees, not on an at-risk percentage of the savings basis, they make billions of dollars. So I'm not worried about this strategy for Philips. So what did they do? This is a big, complicated case. If you've gotten through this case, boy, give yourself a pat on the back. This is a hard case. What'd they do? Let's watch Brian Rosenfeld as he tells us about what they did and how he developed himself to be in a position to do the things that he's done. So, Brian, how's it going?
It's going very well.
You've got beta sites?
Yes. We have sites all over the country that we're testing different components of the entire care continuum, from, Banner Health down in Phoenix, where we're testing this intensive ambulatory care program, which is very counter to the patient-centered medical home, which is getting a lot of press.
Oh, that's a disaster. That's just ridiculous.
What we're really saying is that, no different than the intensive care unit, you need specialized PCPs to manage these hyperchronics, the top 5% that, account for 50% of the costs. And so it's a different way of approaching care.
Absolutely.
And here again, we're trying to keep it high-tech, high-touch, because it's clear that at least this elderly population now requires a certain component of high touch. Now, we may all at some point require that, but maybe subsequent generations will be more tech and less touch.
Right.
But
and be healthier also.
Yes, hopefully. And so that's some of those experiments. We're experimenting with discharging patients from the emergency department into the home, utilizing different devices. Philips has a device for measuring white blood cell counts at the point of care. Well, that becomes a very powerful tool for a home health nurse to be able to take in, because a lot of times we admit patients or we keep patients in the hospital longer just to check labs and do vital signs.
Yeah.
Well, if I can do that at home, why put them in an expensive bed?
Right. So, how did you do? Once again, I ask you to grade yourself as a group. And when you get done with that and submit those grades to us, I hope you will reflect on this course. So I hope that you will go out and innovate the healthcare system. It needs it. Needs you to do it. Not going to happen from anybody except for people like you. I hope you'll do good. I very much hope you'll do well. Go out there and innovate to your good health.